What's going on, guys? It's your girl Hatter, and welcome back to Hatter's Crochet Corner, or welcome to Hatter's Crochet Corner. If you're new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, like, comment, share. Really help me and the algorithm get my videos to more people. And yeah, so in today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to do chain stitches and single crochets. Now, these are like the basis of learning how to crochet, really. That's where I started, and I'm gonna teach you guys the way that I learned it. So I have here a small skein of yarn that I got off of Amazon. Really thin, really cheap, not really too much of a cost investment. Yeah, so I got this. It's kind of hard to see with like the lighting, but this is like a hot pink. I don't know if that comes off well on camera like it does in person, but yeah, so this is like a hot pink. And I have a cute new background for you guys today. Instead of white, we're doing blue, so I thought that was pretty cool. And I'm gonna use a 5mm hook. If my camera will focus. I'm gonna use a 5mm hook and a pair of scissors for cutting the yarn, a tapestry needle for weaving in the ends, if you're doing a swatch and you want to keep the swatch instead of like doing one row and unraveling and redoing it. These are two different types that I own. This is a metal one that has like a curved end, and this is like more of a plastic one that's more like flexible and bendy. If you're just starting out, I would recommend getting the plastic one over the metal one, just because the metal one can be a little bit harder because it doesn't have the flexibility that this one has, but this one will break easier. So that's just something to keep in mind. And then this isn't necessarily a need, but it's a recommendation to get stitch markers. So stitch markers are exactly what they sound like. They mark the stitches that you're on. They're great for counting stitches. They're great for marking rows. And stuff like that. They come in different shapes and sizes. So these are just a couple different types of stitch markers that I own. This one is kind of like curved and large. This is obviously for larger, like thicker yarn than the yarn that I'm using in today's video, so I won't use that one. But this is kind of like the same thing but smaller. And then these one actually open and close. So these ones won't fall out. This one, if I can pick it up, this one can fall out easy because, you know, there's like a gap and there's nothing like holding this closed. You can get these from Amazon. You can get them from your local craft store. These ones, oh, wow, that's a perfect example because I just did it on camera. These break really easy. These new ones that I got, I literally just tried to open it and hello, okay, I literally just tried to open it and I broke it. So this happens a lot with these. I find that I break these pretty often. So these like more like plasticky ones last longer than these other ones, and that's really a shame because this was a matching set that I wanted to use for the video because I thought it was cute that they were the same color, but I just broke this one. So yeah, anyways, we're gonna throw that out. And yeah, so you gotta be really careful with these because as I just proved, they break very easy. But yeah, these are good to have. They're not necessary, but yeah, they're good to have. So you're gonna start by creating a slip knot, and I create a slip knot by, what do? I wrap the yarn around my pointer finger and my middle finger like so, and then I come and I bring it back across so that it makes like an X here like that. And then I usually do it with my finger. Some people do it with the actual hook. You can do it with either one, whatever makes you feel comfortable. And I go under the first line of yarn on my fingers, and then I pull the second one through like so, and it creates a little slip knot. This one's big, but you can pull the end of your yarn to pull it closed I'm like pinching where the knot is and pulling it. And then you can put it on your crochet hook and hold. I'm gonna put your pointer finger and your thumb over the knot and just pull the working yarn, not the working yarn, the end on your hook. You don't want to pull it super tight because you want to still be able to pull yarn through the loop. But yeah, and then to hold my yarn, I wrap it around my pinky and then around my pointer, I think. How do I do this? Oh, okay, so I wrap it around my pinky and then I bring it behind my pointer. I think explaining this feels weird. Yeah, it's something like that. I do something like that. People hold their yarn differently. So there's no right or wrong way to do that. But yeah, that's what I do. So I did a swatch off camera and I left the ends on because I want to show you how to weave in the ends. But this little swatch here is single crochets. So this is what it'll look like when you're done with it. This is a 10 by 10, so 10 single crochets across and then 10 rows up. So this is what we're gonna work on. I find that working in little swatches helped me learn the stitches faster than just doing a row and pulling it apart and redoing it and pulling it apart. It's very tedious, and I don't want you to start having a bad relationship with frogging, which is the proper term for pulling out yarn, like pulling out projects. Some people use frogging when they want to use the yarn for something else that they know they'll finish. Like if you have unfinished products and you're just tired of trying to finish it, you will frog it and use the yarn to make something new. In the art of doing frogging over and over again, trying to learn as a beginner can be very frustrating because then you feel like you didn't really actually do anything. You know, you're just taking apart the little bit that you did do, and that didn't really help me. So I started doing swatches like the one that I just showed you, and that helped a lot. So to do chains, you're gonna take your yarn and hold it whatever way feels comfortable to you. You want to really get used to holding the yarn and finding a tension that's good. You don't want to hold it too loose or too tight, because if you make the stitches too tight, then you can't work into them, and then that becomes a problem. But you want to take your yarn and yarn over and then pull through the loop on your hook. Now that, what I just showed you, was because I had the loop on my hook way too tight. I had my slip knot too tight. So I'm actually going to take this apart and redo it because that was way too tight. Yeah, so you definitely don't want to pull your loop too tight. I recommend keeping it loose when you're just starting out until you get used to having a specific tension. Wow, there's hair on that. Or is that the fuzz from the yarn? That's the fuzz from the yarn. Okay. Yeah, but so you take it and you yarn over and then you pull through, and that creates your first chain stitch. So you create little V's when you do chains that you'll later work in your single crochets in. So I'm going to chain 11. And the reason I'm chaining 11 instead of 10, remember I said I had 10 single crochets in the swatch that I showed you, is because when you do your rows, you're going to chain one when you turn. So I always do one extra chain than whatever I'm working on if I'm doing single crochets, and obviously that changes depending on the type of stitch you're doing, but I will get more into that in a later video. But for right now, I'm going to chain 11. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So I'm gonna chain one more. But one thing that I want you to note is you see how loose these holes are? You don't want to make them super tight because then you can't fit the hook back through it to make stitches, right? But the chain, you can see these little V's that you make when you do your chain. So that's what a chain looks like. And then in order to count your chains, this took me the longest time to figure out, but you want to count how many V's you have. So full V's. So this is 1, this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10. This chain is a little tight though, so I'm gonna gently pinch the chain below it and pull it out, and then pull up that loop, and then do it again. So that was 10, and so I'm gonna chain one more. So right now I have a chain of 11, and because there are 2 V's here, this is the front of the chain, but this is what the back of the chain looks like. And it's kind of hard to see on camera, but there are little bumps. If I tilt it, you can kind of see like the top of the chain here, and there's little bumps on the bottom. That's considered the back of the chain. Depending on what project you're working on will depend on which hole in the chain that you go in. But to keep it simple, we're gonna go into just the top loop here. So you have your 2 loops, right? Your top loop here and then your bottom loop here. We're just gonna go into this hole right here. So instead of going directly into the chain, the last chain we did, we're gonna go 2 chains in, which will be the 10th chain. And we're gonna stick the hook in to the hole and then yarn over and pull the yarn through so that you have 2 loops on your hook. And then you're going to yarn over again and pull through both loops. That's your first single crochet. So you want to continue along this, doing the same thing. I'll do the first row with you. So you're going to go stick your hook into the loop, yarn over, pull up a loop so that there's 2 loops on your hook, and then yarn over again and pull through both loops at the same time. And so we're going to do it again in the next chain. Stick your hook in, yarn over so that there's 2 loops on your hook, and then yarn over again and pull through both loops. Now, you want to make sure while you're doing this that you're keeping your chain straight. Sometimes it's very easy to flip this over by accident and start working into the back, and then your bottom line won't be straight. So, and your pattern won't, like, your swatch won't lay flat. So it's very important that you're still working into the front of the chain and not into the back of the chain. So we're going to keep going. So we're going to find the next hole, which on camera is kind of hard to see because this chain is a little tight, but we're going to stick the hook through and yarn over and pull up a loop so that there's 2 loops on your hook, and then you're going to yarn over again and pull through both loops. And so you find the next chain, stick your hook in and yarn over, pull up a loop so there's 2 loops on your hook, and yarn over and pull through both loops. So what we're doing right now is creating single crochets. So that's really how it is. It sounds really simple, but as beginners, it's really hard to understand how to do this and how to hold the yarn and the hook to where you're getting a good tension so your stitches aren't too tight or too loose. And honestly, the best way to figure out what works for you is practice. Practice holding the hook different ways. Practice holding your yarn different ways. You may see me do it one way and see another YouTuber do it another way. And that's perfectly fine because not everybody crochets the same. And it's honestly a huge learning curve. You have to figure out what works best for you. right? So now we got to the last little bit of the chain, or the very first chain that we did. And so we're going to go into that hole right there, and we're going to do the same thing. So push the hook through, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through both loops at the same time. Now, if I'm ever going too fast, you can definitely slow down the video. If you're wondering what I just did, this is technically our slip knot. So I just pulled it closed so that that gap right there wasn't as big. And we just did our very first row of single crochets. So single crochets, you can see, hold on, let me pull up a large loop and take the hook out so you can see what I'm talking about. But the tops of single crochets have these V stitches, right? So you have your V, there's another V here, there's another V here, right? That's a top loop and the bottom loop. And depending on what you're working on, they'll tell you back loops only or front loops only. But to keep it simple, when we're doing single crochets in this video, we're going to go underneath both loops. So I will show you what I'm talking about. So to go from here to the next, to the second row, what you're going to do is you're going to chain one. So that's just yarning over and pulling through. So you're going to chain one and you're going to turn. And what I mean by turn is, so you see, this is my left hand, this is my right hand. So I have right now the end of the yarn and the slip knot on the left side. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to turn it so that it's on the right side. So right now, you're looking at the back of what you were just looking at. So all of your stitches are going to the left, and you're going to work from right to left. Right? You're always working from right to left, doing like lines like this, unless it's like a different type of stitch. But I've never done straight up stitches where I was working in a different, like if I was working left to right. I'm sure there's some out there that I maybe just don't know about. But so we're gonna be working right to left. And so you see this little hole right here? That's the hole we're going to be putting our hook in. So from the top view, this is our single crochet, right? Basically, you have your back loop and your front loop, and you want to go underneath both loops at the same time. So we're coming from our chain and turn, and you're gonna go in this hole right here underneath both loops. So you should technically have 3 loops on your hook. The loop that you already had, the back loop, the front loop here, and the back loop here, right? So if you separate this stitch, that's 2 different loops right there. So the loop you already had on your hook, the front loop, and the back loop. And you're gonna yarn over and pull up a loop and pull through both loops, right? That's your single crochet. And this is where a stitch marker would be helpful in order to mark your first single crochet of the row in case you get lost. So what I do is I take, and actually I think I might use this one because it's a little bit easier to see on the camera. But what I do is I take the stitch marker and I push it through both loops in the single crochet underneath. I push it underneath both loops like so. So you can see both loops, that V, are on the stitch marker, and then I will take it and push it closed. So I can let go of that now and it won't fall out. And that marks the first single crochet of this row. So we're going to keep going and we're going to do single crochets all the way to the end. And so we're going to go into the next single crochet and push under both loops and yarn over to pull up a loop. And then we're going to yarn over again and pull through both loops. And you're going to keep doing this the longer you go until you reach the end of the row. So find your next single crochet and go underneath both loops, yarn over, pull up a loop until you have 2 loops on your hook, and then yarn over and pull through both loops. So find your next single crochet, go underneath both loops, and yarn over and pull up a loop, and then you have 2 loops on your hook. You're going to yarn over and pull through both loops, and that creates your single crochet. So we got to the last single crochet that we have to work into for the row, and sometimes it's kind of hard to see. So if you tilt your work sideways and look at it, you can see that there is a V stitch here from your last single crochet of the previous row. So that's your front loop and that's your back loop. So you're going to want to do the same thing we've been doing, and you want to make sure that you push your hook through both of those loops so that both of them are on your hook. So you still have the loop that was on your hook before, the front loop of the stitch, and the back loop of the stitch. And you're going to do the same thing. So yarn over and pull up a loop, and yarn over again and pull through both loops, right? So that's the end of your second row. And you're going to do the same thing you did in the first row to get back to the other side. So you're going to chain 1 and turn. So now all your stitches are going to the left again, except the stitch marker is on your left now instead of on your right. And you're going to do the same process. So we get to the last stitch of the row, the marked stitch. And the good thing about this is, whereas in the last row, I had to point out where the stitch was, if you mark your stitches at the beginning of the row, when you go to do the next row, the stitch you marked at the beginning of the previous row becomes the end of the next row. So you can find where your last stitch is without having to tilt it and search for it and try to figure out where to put your hook. So I marked this, so I immediately see that there's a hole here where my stitch marker is, and this hole marks the last stitch, meaning that's where I put my hook. And depending on how tight you made your stitches, you don't even have to pull the stitch marker out right here. You can just push it past the stitch marker into that hole. And then yarn over, pull up a loop, and do the same process of creating your single crochet. Now, this is the first 3 rows done. I'm going to skip ahead and go to the other swatch that I did off camera, just for time's sake. But yeah, so this is what it looks like so far. And then this is what it'll look like when you're done with your 10 rows, right? Now, these look completely different because these are 2 different thicknesses of yarn. So depending on how thick or thin your yarn is will also depend on what it looks like. So you see the stitches here are the same. It's the same stitch, but this is slightly bigger than this yarn. It's just because this yarn is thicker. So that's why it looks like that. But when you do your 10 rows, your scissors come in because when you finish your last single crochet and you do your chain 1, you just cut off a little tail and pull it through. So if you don't know what I mean by that, I'm going to just fasten off this real quick and show you what I mean. So you would chain 1 to end, right? And instead of turning and continuing to go the other way, you would just cut off, you'd take your scissors and cut off a little tail, just enough to weave back in. And to fasten this off, you would just pull the yarn through and pull it tight. And then that would be your way of fastening it off. So, putting that aside, this is what it would look like. So you have your tail from when you started, right? And then, yeah, this is the slip knot. You can tell from when you pull it, the stitch gets tighter. But you have your tail from when you started, when you did your slip knot, and then you have your tail from when you fastened it off at the top. So this is your swatch. This is what it looks like from behind. It's basically the same thing. And so in order to weave in the ends here, I'm going to take my tapestry needle or my darning needle. It's the same thing. Some people use different terminology. And so I'm going to kind of just like roll the yarn in my fingers to tighten it. Sometimes like you have loose ends and the yarn is very frayed at the end, and it's easier to fit it through the hole if you roll it to where it's tight and then fold it. So you see how it just like kind of twirled in on itself? Then you want to take the needle and just wiggle it through. This is the fastest way that I've learned on how to thread a needle. And then you just take it and pull it through. And then you straighten out the yarn. And you have a needle threaded, right? So I take it and I pull it until I have like a little bit left here. And I can fold that in like so. And then you want to take it and you can weave it in either going down the side here or along the side here. I personally like going down the side, depending on the stitch. So for this one, I'm gonna kind of turn this to where, so I have it like this, right? So I kind of turn it upside down and then I flip it sideways. And this allows me to see what loops I can fit the darning needle through. So clearly I have this loop here. And then I kind of just keep going, finding loops that I can put the needle through. It's kind of hard to explain per se what I'm doing, but I feel like the visual of me doing it might help. So I'm just trying to find like loops of the stitch. It's probably like sometimes the same loop, sometimes it might be a different loop depending on how tight the edges of it is. And I'm just gonna kind of push the needle through them until I get through the other side, right? And this is easy because this swatch is so small. And then I'm just gonna push the needle through and pull it through. And in doing so, I'm pulling through that extra bit of yarn that I had up at the top, right? And then what I like to do to make sure it's really in there is I kind of pull it tight to where this bunches up a little bit, and then I cut off the excess. And then I straighten it out and flatten it out and see where it sticks out at. So right now, my weaved in end sticks out right here. So what I'm going to do is just do the same process and cut off a little bit. Now you want to be very careful about cutting this off because you can cut the actual stitch and then your whole project will start unraveling. And it'll be really hard to fix and you'll most likely have to pull the whole thing apart and start over. But that's that end, and then we're gonna do the same thing on the opposite end with our other end of yarn that we have sticking out. So this is what, move all of that out the way. This is what your end swatch looks like, and congratulations, you just did your first swatch of single crochets. So thank you guys for watching. As always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Leave me any feedback on what I can do better, or if you want me to make another tutorial explaining certain things that I maybe didn't explain enough in the first one, or if there are other stitches that you want to see me do tutorials on, just drop those in the comments and I will try and see if I can do it for you guys and explain how to do it. But yeah, so thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.